Well, thank you so much. It's great to be here. I'm Antha Williams. I lead the climate and environment programs at Bloomberg Philanthropies, which includes work on oceans and air pollution, energy transition, sustainable finance, and cities, which is what we're here to talk about today. And Seattle has been a really close partner of Bloomberg on many topics that are close to our heart, from clean energy to green jobs and buildings. And I think at Bloomberg, where our mission is to ensure the best, greatest, longest lives for the greatest number of people, the intersection of cutting emissions with providing livelihoods and good-paying jobs to people is really central, and that's something that Seattle has demonstrated a lot of leadership in. So we're excited about the conversation here today. Mayor Harrell has demonstrated a deep commitment to good green jobs and making them available to all. Through the Seattle Green New Deal and the workforce development programs, the city is really investing in clean energy jobs training in growing industries like construction and energy efficiency and clean energy. So I want to start with a few questions for you, Mayor, and hear what's happening here in Seattle, and thank you for hosting us for this event. In December, the city unanimously passed a buildings performance standard. So it would be great just to hear a little bit about the impact of that work and why it's so important.
Thank you, Antha. Excuse me. Thank you for having me here. And before I'm a politician, so I'm not going to answer your question directly right away. You know that. I want to thank all of you for having the festival here. I mean, we are honored as a city, not just as a city, but as a state. I think we have one of the greenest governors, and Jay Inslee, in the country. And Bloomberg, thank you. I get $20 every time I say that, by the way, so it's adding up. But in all seriousness, we are very prideful of our commitment to what I call the climate war, if you will. So thank you for having the festival here. Getting back to we call it BEPS, the Building Emissions Performance Standard. Now, you have to recognize something, that we put a stake in the ground by saying that we're going to reduce our carbon emissions by 2030, 27% by our major buildings. Now, what's important about that is this is a time coming out of COVID when a lot of our downtowns throughout your respective cities are hurting for occupancy. We recognize that. There's no perfect time to fight against climate change. And so working with the building owners, working with our residents and our workers and our employees, trying to get people back into our cities, we said now is the best time to reflect our values. It's during tough times you reflect your values. And so it's the functional equivalent of getting 72,000 fossil-fueled gasoline cars off the road. So we looked at, what our buildings are doing. We put a stake in the ground, and there's sort of four pillars of what we're trying to create. Number one is energy production, of course, and that employs a lot of people. Your designs, your architects, everyone that could help us design it. You look at the construction piece, and you see at our climate work, we bring out construction and building and trades and our unions and our labor workforces to fight for us with us, because it's really, really cool, as all of you know, to create jobs and save our planet, save the land, save the air, save the water. And so we make sure that we have our advocates there standing with us as we push this kind of legislation through. And of course, on the compliance side, to measure what we're doing, that employs a lot of people as well. And so you could put a stake in the ground, but it's meaningless if you don't measure it. And so we look at, again, in my role as mayor, quite candidly, is I have to be sort of unashamedly bullish about our climate commitment. It's hard to convince people that are hungry or dealing with opioid addiction and mental illness and miseducation and other types of challenges in their life to say, but we have to save the planet. This work that all of you are doing, by the way, we're not going to have this work done in our lifetime, so we're fighting for something beyond our meager and short-lived existence on Earth. That's a noble thing. And so, as mayor, my job is not only to put the stake in the ground, to motivate people to think beyond themselves. And so our BEPS was a good building emissions performance. I'll call it BEPS. Our BEPS platform was not just a means to say, let's reduce carbon emissions by 27% in these huge buildings, but to say this is a unifying element, regardless of race, socioeconomic level, gender, whatever demographic you decide you want to identify with. This is a unifying element to fight for something beyond ourselves. And that was the basis for our legislation.
One of the other programs that you've taken on is low pollution neighborhoods, which I love the sound of that. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so here in Seattle, and first of all, Seattle's pretty cool, right? All right. I was amazed, by the way, just in preparation for this, talking to folks, that some of the technology you all are working on. I met a young lady. She's probably going to love it when I give her a shout out. I can't remember your name, but she talked about getting people of color and women in industries that are traditionally dominated by a different demographic. And it's just amazing who I'm talking to right now. So we have to be honest here in Seattle. Seattle's about 84 square miles. And historically, you would not know this, but we had our issues of racism and segregation and racial restrictive covenants in certain neighborhoods in our 84 square miles, and many neighborhoods have been historically neglected. And so in looking at what neighborhoods need it the most, we decided to let's identify 3 as sort of a pilot, if you will, and let's create, in the name of equity and fairness and kindness, let's create low pollution neighborhoods and make sure we're doubling down. So yes, I think I get my days mixed up here. A couple of days ago, I announced that we're putting on a transportation levy. It's going to be $1.55 billion that is laden with climate work and transportation work and tree planting and canopy development and everything you want in a beautiful planet. More protected bike lanes, as an example. I had a bike advocate lobby me on that. And I said, oh, you're going to be very pleased with this package. So we're creating these neighborhoods and making sure that all of our investments sort of challenge to what could be our model neighborhoods. I issued in 2022 a Transportation Climate Justice Executive Order, and in that we will demonstrate in these certain neighborhoods through objective criteria where we're going to focus, looking at more tree canopy, more protected bike lanes, looking at where we have just areas that get incredibly hot, how we can look at some of our own assets like community centers and turn them into resiliency hubs. And so it's a very focused approach, neighborhood by neighborhood, on creating our carbon neutrality.
That's great. Well, the issue of workforce development and green jobs, I know, has also been close to your heart and a big issue for many cities that we work in. I know the city just allocated another $2 million for inclusive workforce development in the clean energy sector to bring, in particular, more women and people of color into the workforce. And that feels like such an important issue to make sure that the skills gap is not slowing our transition to the clean energy economy. How is that program working? How do you see that happening here?
Yeah. Antha, thanks for that question. And so we're putting real money behind this. For example, we're putting $4 million into local organizations to recruit. Now, if you remember one thing about this mayor of Seattle, I want you to remember this, that here in Seattle, many of you know I'm biracial. My mother was Japanese and my father was black, which means I look Hawaiian, by the way. And they met when they were 14, and they went to the same high school, married their entire life, and they taught me to look at race, I think, a little differently, because when I say who identifies as being multiracial, usually a few hands will go up. It's an increasing demographic, by the way, in this country, which is a good thing. But I say everyone's hand should go up. You look at your genealogy, and I guarantee you, you're not just one, didn't come from one country, if you want to look at countries. But in this work, I challenge you. We sit in conferences like this and we say, yeah, we're really cool. Let's hire more women. Let's hire more people of color. That's the right thing to do. But do we do it? Do you sit around in your groups and do you say, you know what, we need to be intentional about hiring a black person? Have any of you said that? Oh, sister in there said yes. I'm having fun with it because that's the kind of intentionality here in Seattle we are trying to create. Now, I don't assume anyone was good or bad or smart or dumb because of race. That is idiotic to make those assumptions. But the level of intentionality has to come from every individual, not just cool talks at seminars. And here in Seattle, I'm so proud that we're doing a lot of these kinds of things here. And quite frankly, mayors get stuff done. That's why the Bloomberg Philanthropies and the different programs that they do, they understand that. And so in this work we're doing, we are investing. And I will lead the way. And like I said, I sort of double dip. I belong to the African American Mayors Association, the Asian American Mayors Association. I'll be the Eskimo if I have to be an Eskimo association, because this country continues to be obsessed with race. And we're talking past each other, and climate work could be the biggest unifying element in this country, in this world, if we do this right. And so and some of you are doing some cutting-edge work, saving this planet. And so I want to impress upon you that it starts with the conversations you have when no one's around. So we're putting $4 million into working with local groups. We invest another $2.24 million into the Clean Energy and Career Pathways program. Looking at we're going to employ close to 300 workers. That will be women and people of color. And this is not sympathy work. Oh, you've been excluded. This is the right thing to do, because you get different ideas, you get a different lens. You're talking to the communities impacted the most by climate change, and they are at the table in a meaningful way. And you all here, if you are here in Seattle for this festival, you get this stuff. And so that's why I started by saying I'm honored that you are here, because you get to hear me say this as a biracial mayor. I'm the second person of color in 150 years in this city. I'm not going to squander the opportunity to say that here in Seattle and your respective cities doing this climate work, you can lead the way and overpower some of this racism that we talk about in this country, because you are doing the right thing, fighting for something that's bigger than yourself. And that is the essence of fighting against racism, is fighting for something bigger than yourself, and that's why you're here. And if you make money on the way, right on. No problem with it.
I love the focus on the data, the 300 jobs that it'll create, and the accountability that you put behind it. Mike Bloomberg often to us says, in God we trust, everybody else bring data. So you've no doubt heard that in your work with the Bloomberg Mayors Network. But you've been very active in the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group. And one of the things, that's the global network of 100 mega cities that are taking bold, ambitious action on climate. And one of the things that's interesting and great about that network is there's participation standards. So if you're just saying good things but not actually doing them, you get kicked out. And one of the things that the mayors there often say is, we basically want to steal the best ideas from each other. So I wondered if you had anything to share about what you think would be some of the best stuff that other mayors ought to steal that you've proven is working here in Seattle, or if you have other ideas about things you're seeing other places that you're thinking, maybe I could steal that and make it happen in Seattle.
Yeah, thanks, Antha. You know, I can't say anything without thanking Bloomberg Philanthropies again and C40 for recognizing some of the work that we did. We went to Buenos Aires and received an award, and quite honestly, these are life-changing experiences. As a mayor, when I talk to other mayors and sort of have these partnerships, I go right to the why, because when you're looking at whether it's water or air or energy production, I think most of you may know that we draw most of our power here. City Light is a couple of $1 billion utility that's under my jurisdiction here. We have about 14,000 employees. We have about an $8 billion budget. We have a strong mayor system, and when I talk to different mayors, I try to find out how they're generating the power, number one. And when we have to get our license to do this kind of work, we then have to look at the climate needs, the salmon recovery when we are damming facilities. What we thought was just good, clean hydropower, we realized it had an adverse effect on salmon recovery. So this is the balance I'm working at. So I talked to other mayors about that. I go back to the why are you doing this work again. For me, saving, and I use the word law, just not because I'm a lawyer, but it's always land, air, and water. I always think of what I'm trying to save. And that's my acronym. And I asked the other mayors, well, why are you doing this? I mean, I'm just trying to save the planet. For me, if we save the planet, we're all dead. What good does that do, right? So we're trying to save our people and the planet. And I try to, again, when I look at this audience, and I saw a very diverse audience here, and then I look at the sponsors here, I want to give kudos to the sponsors. I shouldn't call anyone by name. I'm looking at the signs. but they are looking at their industry. Let's say it's in the hospital industry, it's in the e-commerce industry, whatever it is. They're looking at their industry and they're trying to decide how they're going to partner with us on climate change. That is a beautiful thing. So in my conversations with other mayors, I have a good hand here. Some of these companies that step up here in Seattle, I mean, we're home to a lot of companies. I ask them, who are your biggest cheerleaders? Who are your biggest warriors? And we need real money, particularly in some of these startup companies, real money, real investment to get this done. And it's good to know that some of these mayors are thinking just like I am, and we steal ideas. And I'll say, look, the one thing the mayor has is the power to convene. When I was president of the city council, I'd make a few calls, and I'd get calls returned maybe half the time. When I call as mayor, they call right back. I take advantage of that sometimes too, by the way. And the mayor's ability to convene is strong, and quite candidly, some mayors don't realize that. And it's shocking to me when they don't realize their ability to convene to get things done. And that's what I'm learning through, I think, the most effective mayors.
That's really interesting. We did hear that, including in Buenos Aires, where you were recognized for Seattle's leadership among this C40 network, but just Seattle's incredible work to bring together the business community with community-based organizations, not to look at these issues as just coming out of City Hall. Mm-hmm. Mayor, I want to ask if there's anything else that you want to share. We're in an urgent time for all this work, but before we wrap, just any words for the crowd or things I haven't asked that we should make sure to cover?
Yeah, thanks for that wide open question, Antha. I would close by something I said a little earlier. And you know, I get a little hokey, a little melodramatic when I start really thinking about the work that you all are doing. The work that I'd done as attorney wasn't necessarily in the world of climate change, and I have a younger group of leaders around me that get climate change better than I'm 65 years old. I know I look like I'm 40. They put makeup on me before, so maybe it worked. But I grew up in a generation where we knew just not to pollute, that we saw a television commercial, and there's a Native American that was crying when someone littered, and it made us realize, well, you shouldn't litter. But we didn't grow up studying climate change, looking at the data, looking at the glacier meltdowns. We didn't think about that. In fact, the first thing you wanted was a big old car, and if it had 8 cylinders, it was a cool car, right? And that was my culture. What I concern myself now is the younger generation. There's opioids, there's fentanyl, they're dealing with, there's social media, there's bullying, there's a whole different generation of folks out there. And what I worry about is how do we create that climate generation, if we will, in our school system when they're 9, 10, 11 years old. They are going to be the ones that are going to change this planet with you. They're going to be your future employees. And so let's think about collectively how do we start partnering with our educational institutions. Not when they're in college. Their values are already pretty much set when they're in college. Either they're going to try to save the world or they're going to make a lot of money. Or they're an artist, which is cool, or they're using one side of their brain, but they're pretty much figuring out their stuff. But when they're in high school and middle school, their values start to shape, I think. And so in this work that we're doing is when you start working with your educational communities, remember that schools are underfunded. I recently have been to Korea and Japan, and I look at some of the world competition that our kids are up against. That's going to be the ones that really saves this work. So I just ask you in your busy schedules, can you mentor more kids? And that's another effort we're doing here. We're looking at all of our assets, our community centers, our tennis courts, our golf courts. We have a lot of assets here. And how do I turn those into mentoring centers such that we pass on all this good work that you're doing to the next generation? So let's think about that a little bit in our discussions.
That's great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.